So, welcome to the podcast, Sjamilla and Vanessa. It is such a pleasure to have you both here. And we're in different countries, which makes it quite exciting.
Well, absolutely. You're in Cape Town. We're in Joburg. Completely different countries.
Completely different countries.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for joining us, Sjamilla, from the Netherlands as well.
Yeah.
It's really cool to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, before we dive into our conversation today, I've got a few questions that you haven't been able to prep for, but they are just to sort of get a sense into who you are as a person. So the idea is to not think too hard. They're just rapid fire questions, and there's no follow-up questions. So feel free to answer however you want and whatever comes to mind. So we'll start with you, Sjamilla. After a really tiring day, how do you spend your evening?
Well, most of the time behind my laptop, going through some sourcing content. And okay, I have this other guilty pleasure, and it's really bad. This is what I actually like to do. I like to watch really, really, really dumb Netflix shows, like the reality, the bad ones, like when you think it can't get any worse, those kind of shows. That's what I do to relax.
Classic.
And you, Vanessa?
I always like to finish my day with like a walk or just getting outside, even if it's just spending time in the garden, having a gin and tonic with the family. Obviously my husband has the gin and tonic, not my son. And yeah, just cooking. I enjoy being in the kitchen. I like to try and have a hard finish my day at about toppers 4-5, to close my laptop lid, and then I'm kind of done. And then it's hard to do too much in a pandemic at the moment. So that has changed considerably. Normally it would be, maybe going out for a drink or cocktails with mates. But we've all had to adapt, right?
Absolutely. And Sjamilla, what's a really good book that you've read recently?
Recently, okay, no, so I'm almost finished with it. Only a few pages left, but I can highly recommend it. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. It's the Culture Map. It's her name is Erin. Well, maybe you can put it in the show notes afterwards. But
Yes.
it's about the cultural differences between people in a company. So it's nonfiction, obviously, and it's so good because in the Netherlands, I work with a lot of people who are from different cultures. And as a remote sourcer, or having been a remote sourcer, I work with people around the globe. And this was really interesting to see how everyone has a different culture and how, as a person, you can work with them. I recommend that, especially if you're hiring people from different countries. Must read. Yeah.
Super interesting. And you, Vanessa?
Well, to sound less intellectual than Sjamilla, the one thing that I do is I do read a lot during the day. Like I'll read articles, I'll read blog posts, I'll learn stuff. But when I get into bed at night, that's my time and that is my reading time. So I read a lot more, how would I say, like nonfiction books or biographies or things like that, just to learn more about people. And actually just finished a really good book called Where the Crawdads Sing. It was just like a for pleasure book. It was not a business book at all. I couldn't even tell you who wrote it because reading on a Kindle, you don't see the front cover anymore these days. But it was just a really good book, well written, and great. Really, really good.
Cool. I've got 2 new book recommendations. I'm so excited. And last question, Sjamilla, what is something you're glad you said no to recently, and why?
Oh, well, wow, this is a really tough one because I have a bit of a problem, which is that I can't really say no to stuff. I say yes to too many things, which makes my time management for myself quite hard often. So I wish I actually would say no more often, because that would mean that I have less stress about following up on promises that I can't follow up on. But to be honest, I just don't know. I don't have an answer. Maybe something comes to mind later, but at this point, no,
Cool.
I don't know.
Well, first of all, apologies for the hardy dars that just decided to come home to roost early. They normally come back at about 5, but it's 2. But I've actually, and it's a very difficult thing. I agree with Sjamilla. I'm a yes kind of person. I always want to get involved. I always want to do something. But literally in the last week, because we're trying to get some time out of Joburg next week, we want to take 10 days and, just get out of the city, see the in-laws. I've turned down a lot of things. I've turned down, speaking at conferences, webinars, training, and it's a difficult thing to do. It really and truly is. But I'm very glad because I have freed up some time to just have some downtime, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
And it's really important, right? I mean,
yeah. Allegedly, I'll let you know when I get back.
We'll see how refreshed you are. But there's that wonderful quote of, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love someone else? And I think that's like self-care comes first. You gotta be your best to give your best. But cool. Thanks for participating. That was really interesting. So I've obviously had the pleasure of meeting you both, but just a little bit of introduction into each of your contexts, because I think it's very interesting. Sjamilla, you've obviously been a freelance or a tech sourcer in the Netherlands, and Vanessa, you've mainly been based in South Africa. But I'm just keen to hear a little bit from each of you how you've defined your roles as a tech sourcer up till now, and maybe also some insight into the nature of your tech sourcing up until now. So maybe, I don't know, Vanessa, would you like to kick off there?
Cool. So I've been on my own since last year, April, where I actually do a combination of things. So 50% of my time I spend training recruiters on how to source more effectively and more efficiently. And that's in a South African context and also all around the world. I do a lot of training, which is cool. One of the silver linings of the pandemic is that people are reaching out from all over the place. And then also the tech sourcing is something that I do also globally, but also on a local scale. And it's pretty much just identifying the best people in a market or in an industry for a company that wants to hire the best of the best. So I've done that. For example, I've moved, thanks to Sjamilla, I've moved Java developers from throughout Africa to the Netherlands. I've also been looking for front-end web developers to go to Toronto, Vancouver, and even local projects. Like I've just found shortlisted a whole lot of people for a head of data and analytics role for one of our biggest retail suppliers based in your hometown in Cape Town. So it's interesting, never a dull moment. And I just way prefer the sourcing side, which is the identifying of talent as opposed to the full 360 recruitment cycle.
Yeah.
Oh, how can I top that, right? I don't have to, but
you pretty much do the same.
What she said.
I do the same thing. So what she said, yeah. So I live in the Netherlands, indeed. I started working on my own or for, freelancing basically in 2018 after being in house for a couple of years as a recruiter and sourcer. I would like to identify myself as a pure sang sourcer, but secretly I'm not. I also like to kick around processes and make things better. But the sourcing part really, I love it. I love to geek out behind my laptop, find people that other people can't find, and more importantly, and I think that's one of my niches, is to get people to reply. So to make every outreach worth it. And that's also why some companies hired me in the past, but also hire me hopefully in the future, is to help them on their long-term sourcing goals. So for example, one thing that I do is look specifically for female engineers, or work on diversity goals, and which is a longer term process. It's not something that you do overnight, and it's not something that you should have that you should think lightly about. So yeah, that's what I do, and I like it. I like that. I love my job. I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the intros. That's really interesting. And I think what's really cool is we're obviously having this discussion remote, and tech. I think I'm just trying to like link our situation to the conversation sneakily. But tech has arguably always been like a little bit more open to remote work than other industries, I think. And this is sort of touching on our conversation today. But I think where COVID-19 forced a lot of people to go fully remote, almost overnight, that's become even more so the case now. And there have been quite a few tech companies that have always done remote before this. I don't think it's completely new. Whether it's in their hiring or just having teams distributed around the world. And some companies like Twitter, Slack, they've gone fully remote now. So I don't think remote is going away anytime soon. It's definitely here to stay, but it's going to have an impact on how teams are structured. And also that's going to in turn impact recruitment in tech quite a lot. So in some cases, I imagine you might actually never meet the developers that you source or screen or place. So I just want to start with you, Sjamilla, because I think, Dutch and European companies with remote work, my assumption is that it's not entirely new, or at least compared to South Africa. But could you just give some insight into where are European companies at with remote work when it comes to tech talent?
I think I don't have one fit answer. So I think it really depends on the company
Right.
that's hiring, because I see a lot of companies that are open to it, but that are not fully remote. Um, and that makes it a bit difficult. If you compare it to what I see about my assumptions on the US, for example, then I think we're far behind. And I see that, for example, when I'm sourcing in my niches in Europe, I think we're 5 steps behind in terms of fully remote teams. But we're getting there. I think a lot of it has to do with, if I look at the Netherlands specifically, is that we don't have these large distances. So for me, going to Amsterdam, I live in this really small village north of Amsterdam, but it's still 1 hour away.
Right.
So it's not like it's impossible. Like our country is so small that within 2.5 hours you drove across it from the top to the bottom. Yeah. So we have less need. So it's more possible to work at an office. There's companies who are getting more flexible, especially in tech. That's like it's. I feel that it's weird if you're not that flexible. But you also shouldn't forget that a lot of people don't like to work remote. A lot of people actually like going to the office, seeing their colleagues, especially when you live. For example, I live in a bigger house, like in a smaller town, but I know a lot of people who live in Amsterdam or in Paris, for all that matters, in a very tiny apartment with a baby, and they want to go to the office. They prefer that. So yeah, but I don't know how that compares to South Africa, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Vanessa, similar to Sjamilla's question, in your experience, where are South African companies with remote work? And maybe you can speak to some of the
It was
experience
actually
you've
quite
had.
interesting, because this used to be driven by the candidates.
Right.
So the candidates were all, I'm not going to work for anyone who's not going to allow me to work remotely. And then it actually was where people were forced to work remotely and everyone was working at home. But they were also, as us lazy South Africans, we now had to clean our own houses, make our own meals, homeschool the children, and hold down a job, which is not that easy. And then suddenly working remote was not that cool anymore. And it wasn't a defining kind of perk for a business. So my correct answer would be is that we're getting there. There's a lot of companies that I'm hearing that are looking at remote models. We definitely, I've only heard of one client, or have one client that I'm working with that is looking at 100% remote and staying that way. They're looking for a hybrid. So what's coming from the candidate side, as Sjamilla says, we mustn't just assume that everybody wants to work from home in their tracksuit pants, that some people want to go into the office. And what we're hearing from the market is that they're looking for the flexibility of 3 days at home, 2 days in an office. Then what you're hearing from the client side is that, business as usual, business must continue. People still have salaries to pay. People, they have to deliver on projects. So we'll be forced to go remote if we have to. But kind of past 2020, I haven't seen anyone making any hard and fast decisions. But for me, it's going to be interesting to watch in the South African context, because if people aren't offering remote or a partly remote option anymore, are they still going to be attracting the top tech talent to their organization?
I think I don't think there's a big difference between South Africa and the Netherlands or Europe for all that matters. But Europe is really big, so what I'm saying for the Netherlands doesn't make sense for example Eastern Europe, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we won't hold you to it, buddy.
No, well, it's recorded, right?
But you don't have to speak on behalf of like Ukraine. You can just Netherlands is fine.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
But like, given that, how does it affect your sourcing when a team that you're sourcing for or sourcing tech talent for is going through that transition? Like either when they're looking to open up to more of a remote setup, whether it's hybrid or full or whatever the case is, how does that affect how you source tech talent for them?
Should I start? Okay. Yeah. So last year I actually worked for a client. So this was before the whole global pandemic, but I think the situation is still the same in terms of hiring people in these niche roles, senior engineering managers. This was a completely 100% remote company. They didn't have an office, so the whole team, over 100 people, were remote. And the thing with sourcing for people in that role is that you actually want to find people who are already used to working remote, because everyone thinks they like working remote full time, but actually people don't, because it's completely different. It's completely different, especially when you have a global distributed team. You have different time zones. You need to get used to that you might not receive an answer right away, and you need to be way more independent. And you also need to know if you are the kind of person that actually can keep their focus, or but also knows when to take a break. And so in that case, to get back to how I used to do that, and where I think you should focus on, is people who are used to that, or who can show during the interview process that they are um, still that they can handle their own business, but that they are um, that they know what fully remote working actually means, because it's a difference. And you can't do that with your laptop on your knees behind like the coffee table. You need a dedicated room, which is different, I believe. One other thing that I like to say on this topic is that what I see on the client side is that they want to fill in a gap of people that they need, because they can find them, and then they suddenly say, okay, but that part of the team can work remote. And I often see that doesn't work like that, because if 50% of the team or 70% of the team is working on the office, maybe one day a week remote, but you have 10% of the team not working, or working 100% remote, they might feel left out, because those people who go to the office still do drinks on Friday or Thursdays, or still have that coffee table chat, just the random stuff that you have if you see people in real life. And so as a recruiter, I feel that I should give pushback on these kind of things and ask the hiring manager, are you sure that you want to involve someone 100% remote while the rest of the team comes into the office, and how is it going to work long term? I'm not sure if that completely answers your question, but this is how I feel about it.
Yeah. Vanessa, it looked like you wanted to add something.
No, I just want to echo what Sjamilla has said there. I completely and utterly agree. It's, the question was, how do we change the way we source when suddenly a role goes remote? And we don't actually change the way we source. I mean, our methods don't change. Yeah. That's different. But who we look for changes, and it actually makes it a lot easier, because now suddenly, instead of, for example, the client that I'm working with at the moment is, I don't only have to look in Johannesburg, I'm actually sourcing throughout the whole of South Africa. So it opens up a bigger fishing pond for me to go and find the right talent in order to fill these positions. But as Sjamilla says, it's for someone who's going to be 100% remote, what I'm hearing from the industry and from clients is, don't bring me someone who's been like a cog in a wheel of a team in a corporate, because they've had a small part of a process to do, and they've had support around them, and they've maybe had someone who's managing them, maybe even micromanaging them. The remote worker is very self-managed, very independent, is not going to just sit back and say, oh, I can't get this code to run, I give up. That's not the profile. So what I'm hearing from a lot of these companies, and this is a global thing, is that don't bring me someone who's been sitting in a corporate. They want people who've been working in young, agiles. I wouldn't even go as far to say it must be startups, but it must be close to a startup where, everyone's had to get their hands dirty. They've had to, move quickly, as I say, be agile, pivot quickly, where a lot of people who've been sitting in a corporate, and I'm not saying everyone, that would be generalizing, but most people are not that kind of a, should I say, culture fit into the organization. But what I just want to mention here on the flip side for the South African industry and clients out there, that, those hiring managers who are looking to hire talent, is I believe that this whole remote working is going to make their lives a whole lot difficult. And the reason being is that you're now going to have South Africans who potentially don't need to have to relocate, but can stay sitting at home and be working for companies all over the world. So it's not like we can just go and find talent all over the world now. The talent can go and pick and choose who they want to work for. And that's going to add to an existing issue, which we have in South Africa, which is the scarce skills issue.
Right. I think, those raise really interesting questions. And one which came to mind, it almost feels like a catch-22. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts. But what you were saying, Sjamilla, and what you echoed, Vanessa, now as well, is like, look for someone who knows what it takes to work remotely, because it is like time management and having a setup and all those kinds of things. But if someone is looking into this remote working phenomenon and thinking that's something I want to do and want to get good at, but they haven't worked remotely up until now, it's sort of like they want a remote position, but sources look for remote experience, so they can't apply for that position or don't have a hope at getting that. So how would you assess someone who is potentially a really good candidate for a role, but doesn't necessarily have remote experience yet?
So one thing that I'm not a good example here actually. One thing that I would recommend is if you're interviewing for a remote position, make sure you have the good audio. Can be, I'm using AirPods, but make sure you have good audio, and make sure you preferably have an external webcam set on, so that the light is good, that that you don't have things in that the room where you are is a space where you can actually focus on what you're doing, the interview, and that you can prove that you're someone that's that's reliable, because that's pretty different to prove during an online interview. But I think you should think about, hey, what would my day look like if I go remote, and have answers to those questions ready. Because that, as a recruiter, those are the kind of things I want to know. How do you manage your time when you're at home? How do you manage distractions? Your kids screaming in the background, how do you manage your cat? Yeah, well, yeah. Those are the kind of things that I'd like to know. How are you going to make sure that you take a lunch break?
Yeah, no, it's all valid things. I mean, I haven't taken a lunch break today. I'm still getting there, But what? To be honest with you, Jamira, I think that question's a bit null and void now, and I think that's another silver lining of the pandemic, because everyone has had to work from home. And I think it's been a great test for people to see whether this is for them or whether it's not for them. So for me, I don't necessarily look for someone who's worked remote before. For me, it's much more about what sort of an organization have they worked for. Is it a corporate? Is it a consulting environment? Have they freelanced before? Have they experienced the full spectrum of what sort of roles you can work in the IT space? Because then they can actually decide, what's worked for them. What did they prefer? What did they prefer the most. And then okay, great, fantastic.
And if I can add to that, if you're sourcing, not everyone has on their profile that they're working remote. So that's not exactly. I'm not searching for profiles that say they work remote per se. Sometimes I do start targeting those companies, but that that's not what I look for per se. But I indeed, what Vanessa said, look for roles or companies that have this attitude.
Yep.
I think that's really important.
Right.
100%.
So to pull on a thread that you just mentioned, Vanessa. So this idea of like, if you're now hiring, if you have the opportunity to hire someone who is remote, as you said, it opens up this huge pond of people that you can reach out to, but they also have a larger pond of companies to sort of consider. So for someone who, both of you have had experience with looking for people or sourcing tech talent remotely, for someone who's now having to do it for the first time, how do you approach that challenge of finding someone if you've got basically the entire world as your oyster for candidates? You're no longer confined. What is that? What challenges does that bring, and how do you think about finding the right people?
Well, I've got a 2-day talent sourcing training course that you could attend, Sjamilla, and then I could teach you how to source and find the right candidates. But no, let me answer that question properly. So for me, you've got to really have a compelling reason as to why the person should join that company. So if I look at examples now that I'm working on, I'm looking for people that are gutful of the corporate kind of vibe, so gutful, the real South African term, you'll probably get it, Sjamilla, being Dutch, like had enough, what I can offer. So you've got to look at the push and the pull factors for businesses. So, the company that I'm recruiting for is fully remote, 100% for the foreseeable future. And what they do is that they rely heavily on their values, and the values talk very much to, and this is probably one of the big reasons I took them on, because I don't tend to recruit, I mainly source in the South African market, is that it's dealing with making life better for humanity. And I think a lot of people are sitting in jobs, and this is one thing that the pandemic has taught us, is what are we actually doing? We're waking up every day to go and sit in traffic, to go sit on a hamster wheel. Are we making a difference? Are we adding value to society, or are we just here to trash the environment?
Right.
So my pull factor for this role is get involved, make a difference, make the world a better place for humanity, and don't just be a cog in a wheel, join somewhere where you can add value. And I think that that's what a lot of companies just to sit down and think about, is that why would people want to work for them? It's not, I think it's even for companies like Amazon and Microsoft. I think you can't just sit back on your laurels these days and just say, well, work for us because we're Microsoft. And why would I want to do that? And I think that that's the why of why people need to join a company or a brand is becoming all the more important.
Right. And my assumption there is that you actually need to drill down further than you think, because I think it's easy to say, oh, because you can make a social impact. It's like, that sounds amazing. Like a lot of people say that, but like drill down deeper. Like what does that look like, and how can a single person make that impact?
Everyone's exposed these days. Remember, everything has gone online.
Right.
And people are not thinking about moving a position without doing their homework on a company. Would you go and work for a company where there are loads of people complaining about their service delivery and everything on Hello Peter? Why would you do that? And companies are not concerned enough, in my opinion, about the brand and the messaging that they're putting out there.
Right. Sjamilla, do you want to add something to that about how companies position themselves to candidates as a way to actually reach them?
Yeah, well, I have a lot to say about that. If you talk, no. So what I always feel is a shame is that recruiters, in general, but I think whole companies in general don't think about how they position themselves in a market, and that reflects on the messages that recruiters and sourcers mainly send to candidates. So we often forget, and I'm not going to make this very long, but I feel that we often forget that we are probably the first contact from a company that's getting in touch with a candidate. Right. if you're Nike or a small startup that someone never heard of, it's the same. It might even hurt your brand a bit more if you are a famous company, a bigger name. The thing is that if I get a message from a recruiter that's really bad, I don't want to buy stuff from that company anymore. I work at a company right now that's creating physical products, bikes, and if we do like bad branding, people don't want to buy our bike. So I think as a recruiter, you should think about every candidate that you reach out to as a potential client or a potential customer, and make every point that you have, even if you don't want to hire this person in the end, make it special, make people feel hurt, make people feel like they're the only one in the world that can fix your problems. It's going to reflect on your brand.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I guess
100%.
I didn't even think about it, but your part of your role as a tech source is to actually be able to understand and then communicate that sort of brand or feeling that the company wants to convey. And perhaps even that's more critical now, that you can't invite someone into your office, you can't show them, that one chance is your first sort of message or your first interaction.
So if you look at a big South African company, who's working with 50 different recruitment agencies who are all tapping into the same role in the market, all, they haven't taken the time to get to know the business, or, they're not selling it as best that they can. The damage that does is so much more than, say, going after, say, a freelance sourcer who, hopefully has, and they generally do, have a much better EQ, and will get to know the company and will go and reach out to the best of the best, because top talent is not sitting on a job portal. Top tech talent doesn't sit on LinkedIn. And this is where you need someone who's got specialist skills in order to be able to track down those good players.
Yeah, and have a mature conversation with them. I think that's important. So, and I think that sets a great recruiter apart, a recruiter source or whatever you want to call them, apart from an average recruiter, is that they actually can handle a hiring manager conversation, that I can level with the hiring manager and quickly pick up what it is that they need, and well, they might say another thing. It's and that makes hiring, so I think, so much fun, because you actually have a say in it, and you actually are responsible for making this company successful or not, especially when you're in a smaller company. It has so much impact.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's why I think companies need to realize is that your recruitment team or your sourcing team or whatever they are not the ugly red-headed stepchild of the HR industry. They have such an impact and can so affect your brand negatively or positively. So you better choose that team wisely.
So just on that, and I know you both have your own resources for this kind of information. So I don't want to give too much away, and I'd rather let people sort of get in touch and to join those avenues. But just on that relationship you have with, whether it's a hiring manager or a CTO or a company in general, what is like one tip for something that you think is incredibly important to communicate about a company? I think a lot of people have the instinct of, oh, we have a pool table, or we go for drinks on Fridays. Is that the best thing to communicate? Or like what is one thing that you find most effective to communicate?
I don't give a beep about someone's pool table, seriously. or the no, I mean, that's I don't know what I can say or not to.
You bleeped it out for me. It's so cool.
Yeah. So for me personally, it's more about making the impact that someone's going to make, and I view it like this: you have this company, and they have a mission and values, and and then you have this a candidate that has values and interests and a mission and something that they want to accomplish, and you're looking for that point in the middle where the company's motivators align with the candidates' motivators, and that is so much more than money,
Right.
money and practicalities. That's something that's a match in terms of, could be like saving the environment, or could be like we're building more bikes in this example,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
we're connecting people with their friends, you know. And I think it's really, as a recruiter, you should tap into that. What is important to the people that we want to hire for this
Right.
role?
Mm. No,
Like,
I completely and utterly agree with that. Let me give you a real life analogy. So, say for example, you're a company, but you are making running shoes. Okay, but you're a tech company. Okay, because everyone's a tech company, and every company's got an IT
Yeah.
department, and you need someone who understands. From an IT perspective, they need to come and join the tech team, but the main industry of the company is running shoes. You don't go and choose some tech guy who's a gamer who maybe walks 400 steps a day between his TV and the fridge. You've got to match it. So you've got to go and find someone who has the technical ability, but is also a keen runner, because he's already got the passion. He already understands the industry. And I think that's what, again, as Sjamilla says, separates, the people who really understand the sourcing of talent and the matching of talent with great jobs, because it's not just about, do you tick a box of you can code in Java 8? There is so much more that goes on behind the scenes.
Right. And are there any other like challenges that we haven't touched on yet, that either of you either like had thought of or still want to talk about?
there is actually one that I've been seeing and that I actually find really interesting in my previous role. So a couple of months ago, Twitter and Facebook and all these big tech companies, they announced that they were going fully remote. Google announced that, or I think Twitter actually announced that they would never
Yeah.
go back to the
Yeah.
office again. That makes it actually pretty difficult for the smaller companies among us, because their salary, levels are big, or like way bigger and way above what most normal companies offer to candidates. So I think that's actually going to be a very interesting competition, because if they are not limited to the offices, what is it going to mean for the top talent globally? Now they can work at these companies without going to the office. That's just something that I've been thinking about, and I don't know what it means actually.
Yeah. It's true, because especially tech talent wants to work remotely. So I'm with you on that, Sjamilla. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. So I've been thinking about this, and I think what it's going to give rise to is more of this gig economy, more people being able to pick up, get involved, come and work on a project, stay for 6 months. And my advice to hiring managers is stop looking for people who've been at a tech company for 5 years or 6 years or 7 years or 8 years. Those days are gone. It really frustrates me, because you get it a lot in the South African market. And would you not rather have someone who's been like the fixer, and gone in and done 2 years, but had massive impacts on a project, got exposure to loads of cool tech stacks, and now they're going to join your team? Or do you want someone who sat for 6 or 7 years, doing support and maintenance because they didn't want to look like a job hopper? And I think that we've got to change our mindsets in the tech industry about, your definition of a job hopper is kind of, it needs to go out the window, because rather look at what the person's achieved and what they've done, because someone who's had more exposure is actually going to add more value at the end of the day, and then take them on as a contractor.
Yeah.
Really, I think permanent employment in certain sectors is going to start slowly falling by the wayside.
But that's interesting. Like if contract work is an option and is more of a rise, doesn't that impact how you think about culture fit with candidates? Because someone doesn't necessarily have to fit into a team the same way that they would with full-time.
True. I mean, to a certain extent, they do still need to fit, and but maybe not as much, because this person's hired to do a piece of work, and that's their role. They're there to deliver a piece of work. But if we're talking about more countries going remote now, the question is, what's going to happen to company culture?
Right.
Is it going to be such a factor going forward?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I have nothing to add.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I'll
I don't know what's going to happen with that. It's going to be interesting, but I don't have an answer or a magic cloak.
Yeah.
How do you say that?
Yeah, I think if I can, I'll cut a conversation we have in a year's time into this part of the video where we actually have an answer. But I think I agree this is like really hard to predict, because it really is. It could go either way. But just on that thing, because I think what you said about like Twitter going fully remote, now top tech talent wants to work for Twitter and they can. Maybe a lot of small startups say, what's the point in even trying to hire a remote developer? Because I can't compete with Twitter. As you said, salaries are bigger. There's like potentially cooler tech to work with. They've got a brand. What are some of the opportunities within remote tech sourcing for specifically tech companies?
The same thing. Yeah,
you
go.
You go. No, you go.
I think it's exactly the same opportunity that Twitter has. Is you can actually find anyone in the world and hire them and add them to your team. So in terms of that, it's going to be way easier. You might have some more competition, but if you are a company that has something to offer to your new colleague and knows how to sell that story and has someone in-house who's passionate about selling that story, it's going to be easier because people want to work remote. And one thing, sorry Vanessa, I'm going to hijack this one. If you're looking for a lot of the clients that I work with, they say like, hey, I want diversity, and then we're talking about male female in this particular case, and they want more female leadership and more female engineers. But the thing is with women, where I at least I feel I can say so because I am I am a woman, is that I don't have kids, but I can imagine that if you have kids, that you want to work remote, and that doesn't mean that you're sitting around at home with the kids all day, but it means that you have more time to be around them when you're off instead of commuting. And a lot of these companies don't really, they want to hire more women, but they don't want women who work remote. Well, I think this is a huge opportunity to add more diversity into your company, on all ranges of diversity. So yeah, it allows people who want to pray 7 times a day to pray in their own environment. I think that's a great thing. It's just how you handle it as a company.
Yeah,
I agree absolutely 100%. But that's the wonderful thing about human beings. I've just been thinking as Sjamilla's been talking, is that people are different. People are going to want different things. So, you're not going to have one size fits all. You want to try and appeal to the majority because you want the majority to potentially want to work for you. But, why does also everybody need the same cookie cutter?
Right.
If you've got someone who wants to work remote and you've got someone who wants to do 2 days in the office, let them. But, if people are delivering and they're doing a good job, do everything in your power not to lose them.
Yeah.
Especially in the South African context where it's so difficult to find developers.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the pushback on that is the only thing that having someone work remotely, having someone work 2 days in the office, is it makes my job a lot harder. But if you put in that effort and that like deliberate intention about and I think, interestingly, it seems like being able to tell your company story is becoming more and more important. Like you can't just rely on having a fancy office or you really have to nail that down, understand your values, your mission, and as you said, like where that intersects with someone else's values and mission.
And also companies need to start being smarter about this.
Yeah.
Appoint some unofficial brand ambassadors for your business. Support them, send them to conferences, get them up on stage speaking at conferences. People want to work for people that inspire them and that they know that they can learn from. But a lot of companies are too petrified to promote their people or let them put themselves out there because they just think they're going to be headhunted. Right. No one is going to leave a company where they are happy. Yeah. Bottom line. No matter how persuasive people like Sjamilla and I are, they are not going to leave.
True. That's also what I said, like long-term goals. What I'm doing in some niches,
Yeah.
I realize it's long-term, and I respect it if I send someone a message who's not interested in the moment, because sometimes people just don't want to move, but at the moment they are unhappy and they want to start looking around. My message is going to be the first message that they
Yeah.
remember and get back to
Yeah.
me. This happens,
Exactly.
and this happens a lot. And there's where you want to go.
Yeah.
Exactly. You need to have, and this is where we get back to maturity and EQ. And I think you'll agree with me,
Yeah.
Sjamilla, is that, you know, if it's a no, don't take it personally from the candidate. Keep in touch with them. Like their LinkedIn post, comment on their LinkedIn post. If you see them at a conference, how's it? How are you? You know, sorry it didn't work out last time or whatever, but let's stay in touch. You never know. And I think that's those are the kind of people that you want to be in your organization long term, because what you're essentially doing is that you are tapping into your sources or recruiters'
Yeah.
networks.
Yeah. Absolutely. To drive that point home and some of the opportunities in remote work, do either of you have a cool example of a role you filled remotely, and why that was such a success?
So
Vanessa?
I had a situation where, I mean, I was approached by the Canadian company that I was working for, and they were looking for Java, Kotlin, like your normal Kubernetes kind of role. And this guy was already looking to immigrate. He wanted to leave South Africa, had a young family, and I managed to, catch everyone at the right time. A lot of sourcing and recruitment is your timing, getting your timing right. And now that I know that they're happy over there, they've been living over there for a year. We connected on social media. I watched them like exploring their new country and enjoying it. And I just think that the person was looking to leave, and I could assist them to do that. And my aim is not to move all of the IT talent out of South Africa. It really and truly is not. I mean, I don't only do tech recruitment;
Right.
it is a large part of what I do, but not only. And I just think that if you can assist people to realize their dreams, then I've ticked a box.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be. And I mean, I got a lot of success stories about remote hiring and sourcing and those kind of things. But I think the reason that they stand out for me is that they were just such a great family, and you get so involved in the process. You meet the family, you understand their reasonings, you almost live through the whole immigration with them. And I just think that it's you've changed someone's life, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, same situation. So I can't actually remember the last time that I hired someone in a fully remote, not like a extra success story, but
Yeah.
just um I've hired multiple people all over the world, and the moment when you have a candidate who comes, who sends you a message, or who sees you walking around and says like, "Hey, you changed my life," and you had such an impact on who I am right now and where I'm going in the future. That's what I live for. That's
Yeah.
why I do what I do. And I think that's something you should keep in mind when you're sourcing or recruiting.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't have that as a recruiter or a sourcer, and you're just doing this for a job, then that's when the issues come in.
Yeah.
My call before this, I was on a call with 20 graduates that I placed just before I left my previous role last year, and they were just contacting me for career advice. And it was so awesome to see them, to hear them, see how much they've grown. And their final words were, Vanessa, you changed all of our lives, and you continue to do so. And we cannot thank you enough. It's made my day. I
Yeah.
mean, that's cool. That's brilliant. It's made my month. It's made my year. It's not always just about the monetary rewards and things like that. It's hearing those things that keep us going and with what we do.
Yeah. And I think both of those, or three of those, are really good examples of, if people are scared or unsure about whether someone would want to work remotely, that people would like to reach out and broaden their horizons in other countries. It's not like a scary thing, and there are people out there who are really willing and ready to do it if you as a company are willing to embrace whether it's partially remote, a hybrid, fully remote, whatever the case is. which is really interesting. But I'd like to spend a little bit of time now going through the community questions. I've highlighted a few, and we'll just sort of go through it. I think I will leave the length of answers up to the two of you, but I'll just bump down the list as we go. So the one here is, how are technical skills checked during a remote tech hiring process, and what sort of level of technical skills is normally expected, or what do you look for?
So I think you can check it exactly the same way as you would do while you do an office interview, actually, because the process can be completely the same. There's a lot of tools that you can use to pair programming. That you can do the same technical exercises that you would send them in a take-at-home test. You can do the same crazy whiteboarding stuff if you like to do that. I'm, not a big fan of that, but it depends really on your current process, and I don't think you have to change a lot in terms of that.
I completely agree, and I just think that you can do exactly the same testing. I mean, most of the time, let's admit it comes down to what the company thinks in a conversation with the person as to whether their tech skills are going to be the same. And it's no different if you're sitting across a table or if you're on a Zoom call. So, but let's face it, the people who are going to be working remotely are going to be the people with the scarce skills, which can't be found in country, because it's easier to have someone in country. So the people who are going to get the remote roles are going to be the people who are at the top of their games.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think this next question is interesting because I think people who need to think about hiring or sourcing, but it's not their main function, probably relate to this quite a lot. But on time management, how do you think about managing your time during the day as a sourcer when you have other things to do that are not sourcing? How do you not go crazy?
So for me personally, I do time blocking. So I am a productivity freak, and I just block everything in my agenda. I know exactly in the morning what my day is going to look like and what I work on, and that helps me keep focused. Yeah.
That's probably where we're similar. Where I think we both probably why our birthdays are so close and we Leos is that we're good organizers. Okay, and we organize our lives well. I do exactly the same. I'll block out. You need time to source.
Yeah.
I mean, I need like a good 3 or 4 hours and whenever I get a gap. At the moment, during the times of the pandemic, my mornings are looking like training in the morning, sourcing in the afternoon, and I think it's just being as organized as possible, like any other job.
And also knowing where your focus lies, when you are most productive, right?
Yes, 100%. Mornings for me.
Right. I think I was just about to ask if you've learned anything about how to organize your time, but I think that answer is like know where you're most productive and be sure to schedule like either the biggest blocks or the most important things in that time. So that's really useful. So now this one was interesting, and I think it's interesting because the obvious answer I think would be yes, but I'm curious to see. So the question is, how important is empathy in hiring, or to what extent should it be employed in a hiring process? And the extension to that is like, are there any kinds of like technologies or integrations that can be used to help with like empathy or human connection?
That's
my answer to this is just don't be an asshole.
That's what I'm saying. Like it seems like an obvious thing, but I think I think it's scary because you don't feel like you can connect with someone as well over a Zoom call. And actually, I had a conversation with someone last week about how they build connection over Zoom, and he says one of the things that he's found really useful is to be the first to volunteer information. So if you want to know how someone's feeling, like start by sharing your story and saying, look, I've had a really hard day today, but I had a nap 20 minutes ago and I feel much better. How are you doing? And that often helps a lot.
I think it's so important, offline or online, to show that we're humans actually, and to keep in mind as a hiring manager or a recruiter that the candidate in front of you, interviewing and hiring is such a nerve wrecking experience. Everyone is nervous. People really want that job most of the times. So keep that in mind, and show that you're human by indeed telling like, oh yeah, my cats are running around, or don't place yourself above someone, but keep the conversation going. That's what I would say.
Right.
Absolutely. I also used to think to myself before pandemic that training online was not as effective. You didn't connect with
Yeah.
people, that they wouldn't get what you're saying. That is absolute crap. You can throw that out the window, because my online training, I have found that it's better because we'll do it over, say, 4 hours over 4 mornings, as opposed to 2 days
Yeah.
of 8 hours, which apparently I now found out was an information overload from my training. So people are actually able to learn more and grasp more. And I think that if the trainer works hard, and as you say, you give a little bit of yourself, I have formed amazing connections with people that I've never met, but I cannot
Yeah.
wait to meet in person,
Yeah.
because I know they're my kind of people. We had a good laugh in the training, and they just had the right attitude. So for me, empathy is empathy, whether online or offline. Just basically, what a lot of South African companies need to learn is that an interview is all about a sales pitch, where you are selling to a candidate because you so want them to join your organization, as opposed to pitching up to the interview and, excuse my French, being an asshole, and trying to get one up on the candidate because you think you've got better coding skills than they do. And that's never going to work, whether online or offline.
There's one thing that I would like to add, is that what I see happening, and a lot of recruiters do this, and it's a kind of habit, is while you're interviewing with someone, making notes, which I think is good. But when you're making notes on your laptop while you are doing a video call, people can see. And it might come across as you not being interested, because you are, if you want or not, you're looking at your hands, and the candidates think that you're slacking, or that you're doing whatever, twittering in between. And I think these kind of small things can help you show empathy. So what I do, I have a good old fashioned notebook, and when I'm doing an interview, I just write it down. And sometimes I have a hard time like reading what I should say, because it's really like but it helps me remind the conversation, and just write down your feedback as soon as you end the call. That's my advice.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. On a more practical note here, someone asks, how should a non-technical founding team approach the remote hiring of like a head of tech or a CTO who is also the first tech hire for a company?
Do you want to take it, Vanessa, or can I take it?
You go for it. I'll chime in later.
I've been in this position several times, not only for tech roles, but also for data roles, and and the thing that we used to do, and what really worked well, is to find someone in your network that you look up to, that would be kind of your ideal hire for the position, but that that you're never going to get them, or maybe you need to try better, because that also happens. Ask people to help you, because in my experience, people in general are very willing to help out. And we've had senior management from other companies help us out with hiring for roles, and actually do the interviews with us to teach us how to hire for that role. And we sent them like a cake or a bottle of wine afterwards to thank them, or we gave them a dinner. People are willing out to help, and that's something that I would do for a role that we don't have in-house expertise in.
Right.
No, I completely, agree with Sjamilla on that one. I mean, I haven't been in this situation myself, but I think, if you're going to find someone who's top of their game, who's trusted enough to be presenting at conferences, or they're running an IT community or something like that, reach out to them. They're normally quite willing to help or assist. And if they're not interested, might have somebody else who they know that's interested. It's all about talking to enough people in order to get the right candidate.
Right. And I think, people forget that if someone approached me and said, hey, I think you're an expert. Could you help me out? I'd be like, of course, I'd love to. I'm so flattered you think
Same
Stroke a
here.
bit of
believe
ego.
my, yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Yeah.
And then
Same
a last
here.
question, which I think touches on something we've spoken about a little bit earlier already, but how do companies approach hiring remotely in countries where they don't have a presence? So if I'm trying to hire from South Africa in another country, they don't know me, they don't know my brand. This sort of touches on storytelling, but how do you think about that?
Yeah, completely agree. It touches on storytelling, and it also touches on the company's online presence. You don't need to be sitting in the country in order to drive past a billboard or a building that says
Right.
the company name. It's all about what the company stands for and what they're trying to achieve, and does the person buy into this? You've got to, it's first of all got to be an exciting role. It's got to be a better opportunity than what they're doing at the moment. And it's having someone who can articulate to the person involved as to why they, it has to be a compelling story. That's just the bottom line. I don't think
So
that matters anymore.
what I've been doing at Zenly is we were actually looking to relocate people to Paris, and that's my previous company. And they're a social media app, and they were actually looking for someone who was going to build something from scratch, which is pretty cool. And that's what I say, and that's sometimes a sentence like where you would be as a product manager building something from scratch triggered everyone to reply. So keep those kind of things in mind. What is exciting about this role, and why? If you ask that to the hiring manager, they probably know. And if a hiring manager doesn't have an answer to that, then we have a problem,
Yeah.
right? The hiring manager should be able to pitch the best, and otherwise we should go back to the table and look at the role again.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, I love that idea. I think if you told me I could build something from scratch, even as a non-dev, I'd be like, yes, I'll do it. Let me try.
Yeah, right?
Cool. I mean, thanks so much for sharing all your insights and experiences, Sjamilla and Vanessa. It's really cool to hear from the both of you. I think this is a very interesting time for software and tech companies, and I think just from hearing about some of your experiences, the opportunities with remote hiring are there. You just got to get over the challenges and sort of adapt to some of the things that make it uncomfortable, but discomfort is not necessarily a bad thing either. But yeah, very exciting. I'm looking forward to see how things evolve, and I'm sure we can chat in 3 months and things will be completely different again. So I'm very keen. But thanks so much for being here and for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. It's been great. It's always good to catch up with my friend Sjamilla. So yeah, thank you guys.
Well, I'm glad I could put you two back in touch. I know how much you struggle. Awesome.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye bye.